Hi, and welcome to your Urban Connection. Remember, this is the channel that is often imitated, but is never duplicated. And today, we're going to talk about a story that not many others, if any others, are willing to talk about. Now, you know, we've just passed Memorial Day, and the pundits will tell you that it is after Memorial Day when most voters begin to really get serious about an upcoming election. Now, we have an upcoming election, which will take place in November, which is about 6 months from now. Now, the two candidates that are running for president are, of course, the current president, Joe Biden, and former President Donald J. Trump. Now, in order for you to take these candidates seriously, you must know something about these candidates and you must know the truth about these candidates. Now, as we speak and as I do this video, one of those candidates is sitting in a courthouse awaiting a jury decision as to his guilt or innocence on a corruption charge. And that candidate is none other than Donald J. Trump. So what I want to do today, ladies and gentlemen, is I want to give you the truth about Donald J. Trump, because it seems like nobody else will do it. Now, as I said, Donald J. Trump is a former president. He was a president prior to Joe Biden taking office in 2020. So I want to go back and tell you about the last term and the last race up to the time that Donald J. Trump became president in 2016. Now, maybe it was 2015. Now, let me just start by telling you about, there's an old saying, you can tell what a man will do by what he has done. And I want to give you today what I consider maybe 10, 11, or maybe even 12 of Donald J. Trump's biggest misses. Okay? Now let's start with in the very beginning, when he was running and when he first became president. One of the first things that Donald Trump promised the United States voting public and the United States citizens was, we're going to build a wall along the border and Mexico is going to pay for it. Okay? Those were his words. Mexico is going to pay for it. Ladies and gentlemen, here we are, 8 years later, and I have to ask you the question, where is that wall? It's not to be found. Okay? Now, that's one. Number two of his hits, we're going to repeal and replace Obamacare. And I want to say to you all, here we are 8 years later, and Obamacare is more popular than it's ever been. What happened to that replace and repeal of Obamacare? Trump promised but could not deliver. Now, let's go to miss number three. Whatever happened to I'm so rich that I'll finance my own campaign and my own presidency? What happened to that? Here we are 8 years later, and idiots, and all of them, for the most part, having a middle class citizens, middle class idiots, are sending money to the guy who's so rich that he's never going to ask for any money. And guess what? The money they're sending him is not for his campaign. It's for his legal expenses. That's right. They're paying for his legal expenses. Of all of the criminal charges that have been filed against him, he is spending hundreds of millions of dollars on legal fees, all paid for some so-called middle-class idiots. That's myth number 3. Now let's move on. Ladies and gentlemen, you remember this line? I'm going to build more steel plants in the United States, and we're going to provide more jobs for steel workers. Excuse me. Ladies and gentlemen, here we are 8 years later, and those jobs have never materialized. Those steel jobs have never materialized. Misstep number 4. Number 5. Whatever happened to the coal miners' jobs that Donald J. Trump, was going to restore? What happened to them? The coal miners gave him what he wanted, which was their votes. And here we are 8 years later, and the coal mining industry is in worse condition now than it was when Donald J. Trump took office. So there you have coal miners' jobs. You have steel workers' jobs. You have all kinds of jobs. But here's the biggest one, ladies and gentlemen. In 2017, Donald J. Trump signed a deal with a Taiwanian-based company called Foxconn to produce a manufacturing plant in Milwaukee, or about 30 miles outside of Milwaukee, that he promised would provide 13,000 jobs. 13,000 new jobs at a new manufacturing facility. Here we are 8 years later, and not one job has been produced. The manufacturing facility was never constructed. Do you understand? Do you people have such short memories that you can't remember any of this? It's all talk, but no action for the middle class when it comes to Donald J. Trump. Okay, so now let's move on to myth number 6. How did that drink bleach to cure the COVID-19? How did that work out for you? How many people actually took his advice against the wishes and the admonition of the scientists to take bleach to cure COVID? Okay, that's ridiculous. That's a big one. Let's move on to myth number 7. What happened to your infrastructure plan, Mr. President, Mr. Ex-President? You promised that you would put together, a plan to improve infrastructure across the country. What happened? We don't see the improvements, and it's 8 years later. What happened? Let's move on to number 8. Why did you leave the country in a recession, Mr. Trump? You inherited a great economy from former President Obama. You inherited a growing economy. You inherited an improving job situation. And all you did was pass tax cuts for your rich millionaire and billionaire campaign supporters. That's all you did, Mr. Trump. Now, let's move on to number 10. How many working class people benefited from your tax cuts? Now, I have the answer, and I'm sure all of you do, especially if you're in the middle class. None. None. Now, let's move on to number 11. And this is a big one for African Americans. Those of you that think that Donald Trump is the darling and is looking out for you. This is number 11. What happened to your platinum plan for African Americans, Mr. Trump, where you agreed that you was going to provide $500 billion in working capital in the Black business community. The Platinum Plan, Mr. Trump, why are you not talking about that now? You see, the African Americans didn't fall for it then to re-elect you, and they're not falling for it now, and you're not even talking about it now, which means you had no intentions of doing it when you promised it. All you were doing is the same thing you're doing now. You were pandering to the African American community to get what you want, was to set your foot in that White House and call yourself the president. But we're not buying it, Mr. Trump. We know who you are now, okay? Maybe some of us didn't know who you were then, but we dadgum sure know who you are now, and we're not buying it. And you know what, Mr. Trump? Neither are the middle class. And when I say middle class, I'm not talking about middle class African Americans. I'm talking about middle class citizens of all stripes. That means white middle class. That means African American middle class. That means Hispanic middle class. That means Asian middle class and poor middle, whatever. They're not buying what you're selling. Because you know why? Because you promise, but you don't deliver. Except to one special group, the millionaires and the billionaires. And then once again, we see you. We saw what you did with the oil industry a couple weeks ago when you promised them if they would put $1 billion in your campaign coffers, you would give them tax cuts. You would make sure they, along with the rest of your millionaire and billionaire friends, would be the recipients of tax cuts at the expense of the working class people. Because you see, Mr. Trump, no working class people benefited from your 4 years in office. And now they all see, as we do, you're all talk, but no action to the middle class. There were no benefits, and you're not offering any benefits. And you know why? Because one of the things, Mr. Trump, you don't have any policies. You didn't have any policies before when you ran. You knew everything. You knew more than the generals. You knew more than the scientists about COVID. You knew everything. You knew all about foreign affairs. But it turns out what you really knew was how to suck up to Mr. Putin and Mr. Kim Jong-un. Okay? Remember when you wrote that letter saying you were in love with Mr. Kim Jong-un? And remember when you said about when you were over there in Russian territory and you said that, hey, you wouldn't know why Mr. Putin would lie about anything about his involvement and interference in the 2015 election. Remember that? I do. And a lot of other Americans do, Mr. Trump. So basically what we're doing is we're making sure that the American public, who's now, after Memorial Day, turning their attention in full, I hope, to the 2024 election, we're making sure that they know who you are and they know what you did. I know some Americans have short memories, and I know it's been 3.5 years, and some of them have forgotten. And then there's some that didn't ever know. And that's why I'm doing this show today, to inform some and remind others of what you did as opposed to what you said 4 years ago or 3.5 years ago, whatever. You see, you say a lot, but you do very little. And the only people that benefited financially from your 4 years in office was members of the Trump family and millions of the members of the billionaire and millionaire class of people who benefited from your tax cuts. That's all. And now you wanted to come back and restock the swamp with criminals, some of whom you pardoned for their crimes, and others who've served time in prison, and you want to put them in your cabinet. And not only that, you want to bring the racist super ultra racists like Elon Musk and his advisors. And Stephen Miller, self-avowed racist. You want to bring those people back into your cabinet. Well, Elon Musk was there briefly. He wasn't in the cabinet, but he was an advisor very briefly before he resigned. But I want to tell you one thing and I'll shut up. Mr. Trump, we are not, as you call them, suckers and losers. Now, when I say we, I'm excluding Tim Scott, Nikki Haley, Ted Cruz, and Rubio, and Jim Jordan. I'm excluding those people when I say we're not suckers and losers, because those people are for real suckers and losers. The military people that lost their lives fighting for this country, whom you refer to as suckers and losers, because you were too much of a coward to offer your services to this country. And yet you want us to believe that you have a great love for America and its people. No, Mr. Trump, you've shown us who you are. You've told us who you are. And some of us believe you. And it is for that reason I want to inform and educate people and re-inform others that we do not need your services in the White House. Some of us hope your services will be rendered at the big house. And a verdict in that direction could be delivered at any minute or any day soon. Okay? So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I'm giving you what you need to know about Donald Trump. And I want to ask you one final question. One of the things Donald Trump said in his tenure as president was, we're going to win so much you're going to get tired of winning. So my final question for you, tell me, as a Republican, are you tired of winning or are you tired of losing? Thanks for watching. See you next time. What you gonna do today? Jackson.